everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint It. Back this week thanks to the motivational challenge I set last week. 5,000 subscribers, smashed it like within a day easily, and a new patron, several new patrons. Thank you very much to all those new subscribers. Thank you even more to those patrons. Thanks for the support. Really appreciate it, everyone. So, this is a model. This is Count, I don't know how you say that. What a surprise. Temeraire? You heard me. Simon Games, Zombicide, Green Horde, as I promised I would do if we met that goal. And this is also going to show off how to paint a red cloak following Acid Drop's tutorial from last month. And this model was suggested by quite a few users, so thank you very much for that suggestion. Just showing you I primed it in Vallejo's Cold Grey. And then I'm going to move on to Army Painter's Crushed Skull. That's from that new Green Horde range, so it seems perfect for the Green Horde set. And I'm just dry brushing this across in basically as much as I can one direction. So I'm just going, I don't think it really matters whether you go left to right, but the way the folds are orientated, I felt like it was good to go from left to right. I'm just going to keep topping up my brush and removing 90, 95, 99% of the paint and just doing that over and over and over. And I did a load off camera. That probably took me 20 goes to get that to the sort of shade I wanted. After that, I'm going to be on Survivor Skin, the skin-based colour that I use for most of my human-ish models. I'm going to be using this is my Rosemary & Co brush. This is a detail brush, I'd describe it. It's a 3/0. I think I'm really enjoying these brushes at the moment, and actually there's currently some voting on Patreon. If anyone's interested in that, we're voting on what I might do a review on soon, and the brushes is looking really popular, so that might be coming up on the channel soon. But spoilers, I'm enjoying these brushes. I find difficulty telling which brush it is based on the names, like it's just some numbers, right? It's not like a regiment brush, a detail brush, etc. So we'll talk about that in the future. So that was just his face and his hands. He's got a pair of hands like most humans. Next, I'm using Dark Stars bronze. It's my favorite bronze. And this came in Acid Drops, the first box that I got from them. And I'm going to be painting all the gold emblems on his cloak using that bronze. That's going to be the base coat. I'm going to highlight up to gold. I do want it to be gold, but we're going to start with bronze. I'm going to use Rough Iron. That's out of the same Zombicide Green Horde Army Painter kit. That's a really, really dark, irony sort of colour. It's almost sort of like a black metal, but it's not. You're probably quite used to me using that. Hopefully you've got that. It's a Benson. Benson was round earlier, and he did mention this is probably his favourite metallic, and he uses it quite a lot now. So that was an interesting comment from him. So then we're going to move on to the Acid Drop tutorial. And if you're not familiar with this, I'll put a link in the description below to the unboxing I did where they supplied a range of paints and a tutorial for painting this red cloak. I'll pop it up on the screen and it talks you through exactly what to do. So it talks about the first paint, the base layer. This is the burnt red, and this is by Instar Games. A little bit in the document to tell you about that. That's a new company in the UK, and they sort of copy out of production paints mostly by Citadel. So I also at the start of this showed you that which colour it was, this burnt red, and also gave you the Citadel name if that's useful. So maybe some people have got the old school paints and can use that instead. So the tutorial goes on to explain that Andy would normally start with the darkest red, but the way these instars seem to work, the formula they use, he actually is starting basically in the middle, and this is quite a bright red, and the tutorial does say if you'd like it darkened down to start with a darker one first, but looking at the artwork I thought it was quite a bright red cloak, maybe even slightly orange, but nevertheless I'm following the tutorial along exactly as Andy describes. So he starts off by base coating the whole of the base in this Instar burnt red. It's sort of a, as I mentioned, quite a bright mid-rangey red. So I'm just using, I probably used the wrong brush here. I do upgrade mid-video to the sort of the zero Rosemary & Co brush here because I was doing it with a detail brush. Basically went up to sort of the regiment style brush and was able to fill in that cloak a lot faster. Then for the second part of the tutorial, Acid Drop does go on to explain that the next colour is the first shadow. This is the IV07 again. It's a replication of a different Citadel paint, which I'll put in the description shortly for you. But what you're doing now is you're painting on the shadows, so it's quite different to how I would normally paint it. Normally start in the shadows and work my way out, but Andy explained that in the first step. And he says for this one, you need to water it down. So I've taken my zero brush, as it mentions in the instructions. I've taken a dollop of paint and 2 dollops of water, mixed that nicely together to get a really nice flowing paint. So as I mentioned, yeah, this is by This is Instar's IV07, but it's that the Mechite Red by Citadel, if that means anything to anybody else. But this should be a sort of 100% or near enough match. Now, what the tutorial says to do is you want to be applying this in all of the recesses now. So I'm applying quite sort of a thick line, let's call it, a wide line. I make this comment every time, don't I? I mean a wide line in every single recess of his cloak. And now what I did notice at this point is possibly the model wasn't the best to demo this, just because it's a Zombicide model. The detail is teeny tiny on his sleeves, for instance. There is a million folds where, you know, even my insane detail brush would struggle to get exactly in between there, especially a wide line. Like, how is that going to manage in like, there's no gap there. So to some extent, I feel like the shade method, the wash method, would have been better on his arms. But what I did is I just basically painted the underside with the shade and left the top a little bit brighter. This is how he's looking after those two layers, and it's kind of hard for you to see, I think, with a bright light. Maybe it was coming across. I think it comes across a little bit, but it was already looking good in real life. So on to the third step now. This is the IV01, or the Scab Red 2012 version by Citadel. If that, again, means anything to anybody, they must change their paints all the time. Now, what we're doing with this one is this is the darker of the two shades, yeah. So we're going to be putting a thinner layer on top of a more central to all of those recesses, just darken it down in the very depths of those recesses. And the tutorial goes on to explain all of this, and I just followed along. And it also explains, the same in the previous step, how much to water it down and what to do. That I thought this was really cool. It tells you what to do, how to make a glaze if your transition lines are too harsh, i.e. you've not thinned your paints enough and you've not blended it well enough. It does cover you for that, and I think that's the most obvious mistake you could make. Luckily, I didn't make it. And again, hopefully this is kind of seeable, but also quite hard to see because it's dead subtle. This is a really, really, really smooth transition. It looks really natural. It's hard to tell the difference between the natural light casting the shadow and the work of the paint. We're next on to Racing Red, and again, this is a Citadel replica, so both options are there for you. Now the instructions go on again to explain. Now you want to be going and highlighting the very, very edges. This is edge highlighting, which you've heard me do a lot and mention a lot. So nothing different here. Using, again, my 3/0. That's really a detail brush. Just very, very carefully painting. This is an almost orange red, but it really, really does make the light, like the miniature, really pop out at this point. You're really catching those edges, and this is the final step, but it really, really brings it all together. And as I mentioned, those folds in his sleeves at the top are really difficult. I just basically highlighted the top in this Racing Red and the bottom in the two darker shadows, and that's just giving it a really realistic look. And this is how it looks finished. Again, I think it's a little bit difficult to see on camera, but hopefully you can see that. Let me know in the comments. Maybe I'm just imagining it and you can see it, but in real life that's super subtle, super realistic, and it's really, really come out really nicely. I'd love to have owned two of these models to do one just with a wash, so I could contrast and compare for you all, but there's only one in the box. I did try and find someone local with a copy so I could do both, but I failed. If anyone's nearby, let me know in the comments below. Next, I'm going to use a wash. I'm going to use the Survivor Shader wash. That's the black wash, and this is just to darken down his hair, which is that cold grey, and I'm also going to put some around his bronze just to tarnish it a little bit. And then going to add some light to his lantern. It's depicted that way. I'm not going to try and do anything special with some object source lighting. I'm just going to do a rough job to add some realism. So this is Babe Blonde, but from one of the Zombicide sets. Just painting it on all those windows in yellow. I'm going to use Filthy Suit and the sort of neatest, thinnest brush I have to do some dry brushing, and just really, really carefully catching that on each one as like the strands. I'm just running it down his hair and just lightening that back up to a really light grey after I shaded it. I'm going to use white primer. That's by Vallejo. I just couldn't find my matte white by Army Painter. Any white's going to do. And I'm going to do some edge highlighting, basically the same as I just did with the cloak, but these folds are a little bit bigger. I'm going to very carefully just do all the edges of all the folds of his cloak, his dress, his, I don't know, whatever, that white garment he's wearing. And I'm going to do all the edges along the bottom, all those folds at the top. I'm going to very, very carefully blend it down the big folds. Then I'm going to go back to the light. I'm going to mix in some of that. This time I get the matte white by Army Painter and the Babe Blonde, about 50-50, just getting a lighter yellow, painting a line down the center of every one of those panes of glass, just like the light's brightest in the very, very center. Then I'm going to use white primer 5 layer. I'm going to just keep swapping between my whites. It's just whichever one I pick up, they look the same, and I'm just not paying attention. Apologies that I swap, but it's just showing you the whites, that whites are white. These are the same. I'm going to paint a very thin line down the center of all of those panes, make it look like the light is very, very bright in the middle. Bright gold's now out, that's by the Army Painter. I'm going to go around all that bronze that I painted in before and start highlighting it up. I'm sort of just dry brushing this. I'm using the edge of my brush and just swiping that across all of these emblems, all of these bronze parts, and just making that look shiny and gold everywhere I can. Then I'm going to paint in some eyeballs. I'm going to use white primer and my insane detail brush here. There's so few bristles there. I just really like this for eyeballs. So just dotting in 2, and then I'll give you a quick show, and you can hopefully you can see the eye on the right is a little bit blurred on his right there, and I'm just going to off camera just tidy that up, just paint some skin back over it, a thin layer of skin, and then just show you again a lot tidier, a lot more realistic, and hopefully that's good enough to do for his eyes. Painted him a couple of black pupils in it as well. Then I'm going to use Machinegun Metal. That's the dark silver by the Army Painter in the Zombicide set. And again, I'm just going to sort of use the edge of my brush and just kind of just dry brush some of this over the rough iron, especially around the sort of lit up areas, as though it's a little bit shiny, a little bit, just adds a little bit of more metallic flair on top of that rough iron. Survivor Skin is going to get mixed in with some Vallejo's Pale Flesh, just the only other pale flesh I've got. Mix those about 50-50, it really lighten that up. And you want to go around, catch all the raised parts, you know, his brow, his nose, got his cheekbones, his knuckles, that sort of thing on his hands. Just going to use dead black paint in the base, and it, as always, it's just a really nice finishing touch and brings the focus to the model itself. And that is this guy, can't even remember his name, Count and completely finished. Took me an hour and 1 minute. Some people mentioned in the last video about my time. I show the time. I'm not trying to show that I'm racing my way through this or anything, and really, you know, take as long or as little amount of time as you want. I personally do them quite quick just because I wouldn't get much more out of them if I spent more time on it. Now, what the time is, hopefully, therefore, is to give you some idea how long one takes compared to another. So between the comparisons of the time, you can see that one model might be a little bit more tricky to another, but then we're all different, so it might not be. Now, apologies if this video is a bit all over the place. It's 28 degrees in here. I am melting. It's horrible. Now, the tutorial in Asset Drop, wow. So I've thought before, they are fantastic for beginners, but I wouldn't class myself as a beginner anymore, and I'd never done it this way, so it's really, really nice to get a new technique under my belt. So I'm really happy with that. Nice one, Asset Drop. Nice tutorial. Keep them coming. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing a different way to doing it, just to my usual slap some wash on it. It's a little bit interesting. There will be a video coming soon where I do just slap some wash on it, so you'll be able to see how that looks different. I'll link that in the description below once it's up, and thank you all very much for watching. See you again next week.